got the legalities out of the way with Zoom. So, Will, how are you this morning? Or the afternoon in your case?
The afternoon. I'm very well, thank you, Sean. How about yourself?
Not too bad. Weather, we were just talking about the weather, how you're getting the heat, and New York's getting about a day break. So I'm okay today.
Yeah, our,
If you
our
ask
level
me
of brutal.
tomorrow, it'll be a
Yeah,
different story.
yeah. I was just going to say our level of kind of brutal weather isn't quite the same as yours, though, across the pond, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I'd take yours in a heartbeat. So, well, first of all, thank you very much for doing this. As we were just talking about, there's a good possibility that we jump off the rails of everything we talked about beforehand. And this is going to be a unique episode for Did You Know That? Question mark. Because Will is going to be sharing his screen a lot. So you'll find out in a second while we're doing that. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Welcome again to Did You Know That? Question mark, the channel where I get to talk to interesting people about interesting and sometimes annoying topics. And this is going to be both. I forewarn you. If you're new to the channel, I appreciate you checking in. Hit the subscribe button somewhere down there with the bell so that you'll get it notified when new content becomes available. And if you're a returning member, you have my deepest thanks for doing so. That means we're doing something right here. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Sean O'Rourke. And when I'm not talking to Will Hunt, I am actually a cyber liability consultant for Combs and Company, which is an insurance brokerage headquartered in New York City. So, Will, this is your time to tell the good folks who you are and what you do, and then we're going to get into all the fun.
Sure. So, hi everyone. I am Will. I'm the co-founder of InDot Security, a UK-based cybersecurity consultancy, offering a suite of technical cybersecurity services and training offerings to help our clients identify, assess, and mitigate risk.
And while that is a mouthful for the layperson to take in, essentially what Will and I are going to talk about today is hacking. And we're not going to talk about it from the victim's point of view per se. We're going to talk about it from the actual hacker's point of view. Will's going to show you some tips, tricks that the hacker will use to gain access to your accounts and what have you. That's where the sharing of the screen comes in. And we're also, hopefully, how we discuss all this, we're going to give you some ideas of how to go ahead and protect yourself. So, Will, before I turn it over to you and we just start going down the rabbit hole, in your opinion, and this is sort of a nonsensical question, really from a purely technical standpoint, but I want to give viewers who are not in this industry on a day-to-day basis sort of a sense. When somebody is online, just generally, what kind of risks are there to them on a daily basis? I mean, is it a greater risk than driving a car, or is it like bungee jumping with a very old bungee? So,
Well, it's an interesting question, and I've never actually heard the kind of the comparison there about driving a car. That's quite an interesting one, and I'm not even sure I'm qualified to give an answer there. However,
I didn't do
there
any
are
research on the
no,
question,
no,
on the
that's fine.
comparison, so don't
You've
worry.
you've really made me think there. No, so there are lots of risks that the average arbitrary internet user, unfortunately, may be vulnerable to. It's not incredibly likely that you're just going to load up the internet one day, go and check maybe the sports results or whatever you might be doing, and there's a huge risk of you being compromised or being hacked. There's nothing really like that. But there are inherent risks in day-to-day use, depending on where the sites the user is visiting, what type of things they are doing, who they're interacting with. And there are, unfortunately, sometimes inherent risks of maybe browsing onto a compromised site or a site that's previously been hacked, and you unknowingly visit said site. And there could be the risk of your computer contracting something nasty you don't really want. It's really hard to quantify or even sort of say what the likelihood is of this happening. I wouldn't say it's incredibly high. The average user doesn't go out of their way to look for overly suspicious or rogue sites. Most of us are creatures of habit. Most of us do our daily, we'll check the news, we'll check the sports, we'll check whatever we're doing. Right. So day to day, we're all relatively safe.
Okay. So I didn't put this on the preliminary questions, but I got asked this during a presentation I was giving last week. Give us your thoughts on VPNs.
Oh, wow. Okay. So VPNs are, I think, something of not a misnomer, but I think the perception of VPNs is slightly misguided in terms of what they do, and I think a lot of this comes down to VPNs shifting risk rather than fully mitigating it.
Sure.
So if you look around online, and I mean, I use a VPN. I do have a VPN
As
that I
do I.
use.
As
Oh, there we
do
go.
I.
And they do fulfill a very, very important purpose in the workplace. Of course, they will allow us to connect to our office, to connect to our data at home through a corporate VPN, through a personal VPN. This is something that people tend to use and sort of have been sort of shown and led to believe are very important to use when you are doing things like using public Wi-Fi, or if you're in a coffee shop or in an airport. And I would agree with doing that in these situations. There are some times though where people are kind of in the habit or in the mindset to have been told that you should be using a VPN all the time, even from home. And that's where things get a little bit different. I wouldn't say you are necessarily putting yourself at more risk there at all. But what a VPN does, it'll stop your internet service provider seeing what you're doing, in effect. So rather than connecting to your internet service provider, whoever gives you your internet, and they could potentially have a look at some of the traffic at their endpoints and see what you're doing, it
Sure.
just shifts that risk across to the VPN provider. So the VPN endpoint might be able to see what you're doing. Now, most third-party VPNs, when you go online and look for them, they'll all be very, very upfront and prolific in their marketing about having a zero log policy. We
Yes.
don't store any logs. Now, I don't know how true this is. Of course, I'm not going to name any names, and I wouldn't know any names to name if I did.
Yes.
However, in my mind, I find it hard to believe that there'll be zero traces of things we do.
Yeah.
There have been examples in the past where that have happened in the media where someone has been arrested, or there's been suspicion of someone conducting malicious behavior and they've been using a VPN. In my mind, if a VPN provider is subpoenaed by court or required by law to give the information of someone using their services, I just personally find it very hard to believe they would kind of potentially go to prison for you. And I know that sounds like a little bit of an extreme,
Yeah.
but there is that side of things. So VPNs, for most purposes, shift risk rather than reduce it.
Right.
However, with that in mind, if you are traveling, if you're in like a Starbucks or in an airport, for example, I would certainly want to use that to make sure my traffic is encrypted. You could also, if you are so inclined, create your own VPN. If you have a system at home, you could do that, and you could then, while you're out and about, connect to your home router effectively and use that as a VPN. Ultimately, your traffic will still be going through your service provider, but it's still probably better than using some public rogue Wi-Fi at an airport. Absolutely.
Right. Well, even if you're on public Wi-Fi via in VPN, and by the way, for those who don't know, VPN stand for virtual private networks. I guess I should have said that up front. I still would not be going on my banking website, my credit card website, or any kind of sensitive website just for the safety of that. I mean, I never do that when I'm on a connection that I don't know or I
Yeah.
wouldn't trust. So,
Absolutely, and just to add to that, I mean, nowadays I'm not sure what it's like in the States, but in the UK, the price of your mobile phone, your cell phone contracts, and the amount of data you get is becoming very competitive.
yes.
So tethering is usually a better option if you're out and about and you have
Yep.
enough data on your plan. Then
Yep.
tethering your laptop to your mobile phone and using that as a hotspot, in terms of security. And I'm not saying you're impenetrable, you're ultimately secure,
No,
because no one is,
but it's
but
much more secure.
it's the chances of someone being able to mount an attack on you via your cell phone network is much, much, much less than someone trying to play man in the middle, let's say, on
Yeah.
an airport router, for example, an airport access
Yep.
point. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I get all sorts of, my hackles get up when I hear people say, "Oh yeah, I checked my bank from from the Starbucks the other day and whatnot." And I just thinking, you got to be kidding me. There's just no way I would ever do that, especially in New York City, because all you have to do is sit in a car or on a bike outside the coffee shop. You don't even need to be
Yeah.
in the coffee shop, and
Yeah.
you'll be able to
Yeah.
get the signal. So, okay, that's good. So, see, if you're watching, you've just learned something. And okay, now we're going to start to get into some fun. So, for a living, you basically you have to think like a hacker to a certain extent, because you have to know vulnerabilities, you have to know attack vectors and whatnot. In fact, you're doing correct me if I'm wrong, because you mentioned this last week. You're doing a presentation for a big hacker gathering, I believe, coming up. Are you not?
Yes, so towards the end of July, a cybersecurity summit hosted by a company called Geekle, which is online at the moment and taking registration. So yeah, I'm giving two talks there actually, a high level and a deeply technical one about password security or insecurity, as I'm sure the audience will find out. That's
Yes.
correct.
Okay, so there, I'm glad I say that's called a segue in the business because we're going to talk about passwords, and that's one of your favorite topics to
Oh,
talk
it
about.
is. It is, yeah.
So, first of all, well, why don't you bring up your screen because you have a really cool logo on your background, and we'll leave that up for a second while we sort of get this prep.
Sure,
So, why don't you start
sure.
sharing?
Okay, no problem.
Because then we'll just jump into this because you do have some cool stuff. You have great education tools, and you and I have talked, and so this is going to be good. So I really like
Yeah,
that background,
thank you very much.
and so passwords.
Yeah.
There are they all always vulnerable,
So they are
no
not
matter what you
always,
do.
no, they are not always vulnerable. The
Okay.
vulnerability lies in us, the human. We are
Okay.
the weak link when it comes to passwords, unfortunately, and that's due to our predictability. We're creatures of habit and we like to create passwords and secrets that we remember, not ones that actually provide security for what we're trying to protect.
Okay. And we brought this up last week, and I want you to repeat it because I'm sure people are tired of me saying it. Do you ever reuse a password?
No, I do not. Don't make me see red mist this early on in the conversation, Sean. No, no, no. Password reuse is a big no-no. You should never reuse your passwords.
Okay, so lesson number 2 has been taught, and this is a big one. Do not use the same password across multiple websites, even 2 websites. Every password should be different. And as we talked about last week, if you can, create unique usernames as well. I mean, that's just another added layer that you can throw into there to help protect yourself. But
Yeah, for sites that allow you to use usernames rather than email addresses, which if you really wanted to, you could go to great lengths to create sort of throwaway email
yeah,
addresses. But
yeah,
that's usually ultimately more hassle than it's worth when you think about
right.
the number of accounts people have online.
Yeah, and I was about to say I think that's when we start to tip over into the land of paranoia kind of deal.
Oh,
And
very
so
much so. Very
I,
much
I,
so.
I'm trying to keep myself from there, but I find myself doing further and further things to protect myself online. So,
Yeah.
okay, so here's what we're going to talk about. Passwords aren't necessarily stolen when you enter them. They're usually stolen en masse from databases, from companies. But
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, no, no. I was about to say, so sometimes, I will get asked, how would an attacker, how would a threat actor get access to my passwords? And one of the topics we discussed, and a very, very common one, is through kind of unrelated data breaches. And as you quite rightly said there, about sharing my screen, let me just grab
Yeah.
an impromptu. Here we go. This is a slide from an unrelated talk I do about passwords. This is a screenshot from a site called Information is Beautiful. I couldn't fit the link on the screenshot, so I want to, of course, make the source known here. Fantastic site that visualizes statistics for a number of different things. Now, this here is from 2020 down to 2016, and then the next slide goes back as far as 2011. First thing to note is that each of these bubbles, of course, does not represent exhaustively every company that suffered an
Oh
incident or a
yeah.
compromise in the world. Of
Yeah.
course, I dread to think how small the percentage of this would be. These are just the ones that are represented on this site.
Yeah.
However, as time has gone on, you can get a very clear indication of the frequency and on sort of, because of the digital world we live in and the ease people are able to kind of get at these credentials following a breach, should the threat actors make that database accessible online, is becoming more and more prolific each day. It's
Right.
becoming more and more rife. And not all of these resulted in usernames and passwords being leaked, but some, well, in fact, several of these did. And as you said, It might be that a user had an account. The example I like to use is LinkedIn, because it's something that everyone can really kind of relate to. Now, LinkedIn were unfortunately compromised in very late 2011, or it might even been very early 2012. However, many of the email addresses and passwords from that breach weren't really surfaced until 2016. And we're talking sort of over 160 million accounts here, so no small number at all. Now, what an attacker will do is when they get a hold of that database, the passwords will be scrambled. And I'm not going to go too much into technically how they're scrambled, but they are kind of scrambled. And there is a process that I will do in my job as well, when I'm penetration testing my clients, when I'm looking to attack their passwords and things. And it's kind of referred to as password cracking. And what that means is taking the user's scrambled password and then trying to break it to reveal the clear text value, knowing that if you do get that, there might be a chance, of course, that that user has reused that password elsewhere, which is ultimately why we sort of circle back and say how much of a big no-no that is. And the speed at which we can do that is absolutely phenomenal. With sort of reasonably moderate hardware, you can look at trying to unscramble Windows passwords, for example, in the sort of the leagues of hundreds of billions of guesses per second.
Well,
so
is
scary.
it in this presentation or is it in the video where you list what an average computer, just average hardware, can do?
That's probably,
because you did show me, I can't remember if it was a slide or if it was part of the videos that we're going to go through.
So it was probably this slide. Now
this one scared the bejesus out of me.
This one isn't average hardware. This one is quite a specialized kind of password cracking rig, for lack of a better phrase. And all these, it looks like some kind of alien hybrid computer, but what in fact it is, like the bare bones of a computer is here, but all of these bits of hardware lined up along the top are actually graphics cards, very specifically gaming graphics cards. So for anyone who loves playing computer games and buys the latest and greatest kind of gaming PC, quite often will have a graphics card, usually from a company called NVIDIA, who do the GeForce range of graphics card. Now, these are all top of the line GeForce gaming graphics cards. So what you can do is, of course, if you have a bit of money to spend, you can buy 2, 3, 4, maybe even 8 of these if you've got lots of money, and put them together. And these graphics cards are the perfect hardware for crunching the numbers to try and break these scrambled passwords. And this, like you quite rightly said, this was the slide where, in the case of LinkedIn, a system like this could guess at over 180 billion guesses a second. But something that's more relatable to us at work these days is our Windows laptops, the passwords we use to log on to our laptops with every day. And for a similar kind of rig, and in this example here, I'd love to say that I have one of these for the company. I don't have one quite this good. We still have a pretty good one though. This probably represents maybe somewhere about a $25,000 investment, maybe a little bit more. But that's not a lot of money to an organized group of threat actors. And in terms of the Windows passwords, we're looking at nearly 1 trillion guesses a second. And when you said you were shocked, that is literally why that picture exists next in my slide deck, for that very reason, because it is a shocking figure. Absolutely.
I mean, it's crazy. Not only how fast they're doing it, but in the quantities. And these graphic cards, I mean, I'm glad you brought it up, because everybody's thinking you have to have these big machines, desktop machines, and really it's just a thin piece of hardware. Granted, it's expensive, but it doesn't take up a lot of real estate anymore.
Not really, no. It is scary.
So let's do this. You have a great tutorial video, and I know, I'm pretty sure you use it during your presentations and maybe even during your education sessions, but how the whole process works, because it's not like the hackers are going to the LinkedIn website and then trying to log in through guesses. They actually, you say they try to crack the password. And I want you to sort of show the folks here how that's done.
Sure. So what I can do is, I've got a very short video clip from one of my other awareness courses, which I'll show in a second. But if I just bring this random slide across as I duck into my slides randomly. We don't need to go into sort of every aspect of this, but let's just say I'm an attacker, I'm a bad guy, and I've managed to steal this. It's called a password hash. That scrambled password is called a hash value. So let's say I've stolen this one here. What I can do is, and what's the most traditional process of password cracking is that the person trying to crack the passwords would download something called a dictionary or a word list from the internet. And there are many, many freely available sources of these. And these dictionaries aren't a normal dictionary that you'd use maybe at an English session in a school. These are dictionaries that contain commonly used passwords, and quite often passwords that have been compromised in previous breaches and therefore have been shown to be used, real life passwords. So what better test bed is there to use than real life passwords? And these word lists or dictionaries can grow to be huge in size. One of the most common ones that hackers like me use, and other bad guys, I'm sure, contains just under 15 million passwords, which sounds like a huge number, but in fact actually isn't very big.
Right.
And when you start mangling these password lists, and what I mean by that is doing things that we've all been kind of told to do over time, like substitute an O for a 0, an E for a 3, and add a 1 or a 1, 2, 3 at the end of our password. At the speeds that we just saw to crunch these, and the way we can try and attack these, and our computer software can do all this for us, and it can do it really quickly. It really defeats these kind of letter to number substitutions that we've all been sort of conditioned into believing make our passwords that much stronger. And many moons ago, of course they were, and I'd be lying if I said that making these substitutions made your password weaker. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that doing them adds no extra protection in the modern day, because it's so trivial to guess those combinations that we really need to be prioritizing length over complexity of our passwords. So jumping back to the slide here, what we would do is we would take this stolen scrambled password. I would download a word list, and I would say to my free computer software that again is open, it's open source software. So
I was
anyone
just about
can do
to say
this.
free. So again, lesson number 3, if you want to get into the criminal world of hacking and what have you, you can do most of this for free. So
it is scary what is freely available out there. Yeah, and the computer software, you'll take your stolen scrambled password, and you'll say to your software, this is a Windows password, or this is a password that's been taken from XYZ website. And you'll need to tell the software what type of scrambled password it is, because there's different types. And after you've told it the type of password and given it your word list, it will take all of your clear text words. It will do all the really heavy number crunching, which is a lot of crazy maths, and it will sort of spit out the resulting value at the end. And if it's not the first one, it'll jump down to the next one. It'll crunch the numbers, and it will produce the scrambled password. And when the scrambled password is produced that matches your stolen one, you of course know the original kind of clear text guess you use to generate it. And that's how we do it. But again, like I said, this is very quick indeed. And if I jump forwards quite a lot, touching on the password reuse, what an attacker will do once they've been able to guess a password. Let's just jump back into our LinkedIn scenario, and I'm Mr. Attacker here, and I really do. I should make this note. I hate to play into the social norms that hackers wear hoodies.
Or Guy Fawkes masks.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. There's certain elements of TV and the media and elements of real life that I suppose in many ways fuel this. But do you know what? I've been a hacker. I've been a professional hacker for nearly 7 years now. I know many other penetration testers and people who do this, and I'm willing to bet that we don't all sit in dark rooms with hoodies on, or balaclavas, as the media might make you believe if you look for marketing images about cybersecurity and things. So yes, I would love to tell you I run around holding a crowbar and a balaclava, balancing a laptop on my hands while I'm hacking. Unfortunately, I'd be lying if I did. But needless to say, Mr. quote unquote hacker here, let's say they've compromised an email address and they've successfully cracked a password from the LinkedIn data breach. Just using this as an example, what they would then go on to do would then to try and test that email address and password in all of these other places. And this can be automated very quickly. This is not a person sitting at a keyboard manually navigating in a browser. This can be very quickly automated, and eventually, more often than not, unfortunately, just due to human nature and password reuse, they will invariably get a match. Or if not, it might be that the password has an extra exclamation mark at the end, maybe in this case. Or if there was no exclamation mark, you could try it with a 1. And just knowing how people change their passwords, it's only a matter of time before you're going to get a hit, unfortunately. However, and very cynically, unfortunately, we do sort of see more nowadays that it's not so much that, but more this, because people tend to use the same password everywhere, which is something we really need to get away from. And so
let me jump in real quick and ask this. How many average attempts will these websites that you just put up allow with an incorrect password before they'll lock the account and say, hey, something's going on here, this doesn't look right, we're going to lock the account?
There's no exact number for any of them. If these websites are configured securely, then something called brute force protection is what you're referring to here.
Sure.
And that is the inability for a threat actor to brute force a password. So that means you've got a valid email address, try password, it's wrong, try another password, it's wrong, try another password. And you're right. A securely configured application should perform some kind of either account lockout or account throttling, whereby after 3 attempts maybe or 5 attempts, it says you can't try again for another 30 minutes maybe. You can introduce things like a captcha, which I'm sure lots of us have seen, where you have to tick a box to prove you're not a robot and that kind of thing. That goes a long way to preventing this as well, and a number of other things. So I couldn't tell you sort of which of these sites exactly do it, because I haven't gone trying to brute force them or even test my own account. Needless to say, I wouldn't want to lock my own account out, and I would hope that all of these sites are doing due diligence.
It's a bit of a pain to purposely lock your own account.
It's something that I would do in all of my tests when I'm testing my clients' websites.
Right.
Any website that has authenticated functionality. So by that, I mean, it's not just a static kind of marketing driven site. It's something where there is an area for a customer or a client or a user to log in. So if there's any website I'm testing that allows users to log in, one of the last tests I will do during a pen test is try to brute force my accounts, basically just to see if my accounts lock out. Because if they don't, that of course presents a risk for a threat actor to potentially try an unlimited number of times. Now, I'm not saying that any of that activity would go undetected. It could be raising all manner of alarms, but it still wouldn't stop that person from trying if there is no brute force protection there or no account lockout, as you say.
Right. And raising the alarms, if all it's doing is raising the alarms, in my experience, that means there has to be some sort of human interaction if there's not something automated already in place.
Very much so.
And in which case, then you're relying on a human to say, oh, somebody's trying to do something over here. I got to hit a button to stop it. And that's no way to rely on security.
Absolutely not. And I've almost certainly mentioned this in a previous conversation. At its core, cybersecurity is never or nor will ever be a technical problem. It's a people problem.
Right.
And you're right, at its heart. And if you take that monitoring, that kind of alerting as an example to allow website owners and companies to see when there are malicious attempts, it's all very well and good having this monitoring and alerting configured. But you're absolutely right. Unless someone's identifying it or someone's reviewing it or someone's keeping a constant, vigilant, proactive eye on what's going on, there could be all manner of alerts happening, but no one's seeing it and acting on it. So yes, there's lots of pieces to the puzzle, and it is a very complex one. But the thing I was going to show you, just to finish up with on this particular section, was a video that I have here showing,
this is cool.
Showing a password crack. Now, the technical bit at the top doesn't matter in terms of what I'm actually doing here. And I want to preface that this was conducted on my laptop, which is not that alien looking cyborg password cracking super machine before. So the speed will be much slower. It's only a very quick video, maybe sort of 20 seconds, but you can see just the speed that those scrambled passwords are going up my screen. This is how quickly my laptop is breaking these passwords. And if we look at the end here, it's just finished. In this particular example, there were a little under 9,000 passwords, and in the software records it as 5 seconds there. 46% of them, my laptop broke. So that's just over 4,000 passwords, which is a crazy number of scrambled passwords. And as you scroll up, and I have made sure this is clean for use and sanitized and things, you can see the scrambled password on the left and the clear text password on the right here after the colon. And it's scary how quickly these go up, and how many, and even some of these, I mean, I don't have a good example on the screen here, but some of the passwords that you can break are actually quite long. During client engagements, I've been able to crack well over 20 character passwords in some instances, usually due to the predictability of some of the words that have been concatenated together in that password. I'm not saying it's always that easy, because good advice is to promote length over complexity, but it is scary if that's what my laptop can do. Like I said, I dread to think what a supercomputer could do. Right.
And I love that video because it shows, and good, I'm glad you're drinking your coffee before it gets cold. In fact, I'm going to have a sip of my tea. It's funny. The Englishman's drinking coffee and the American's drinking tea. So
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how big tea is out there, in particularly in New York. But
oh
I
no,
am I'm a big coffee drinker.
yeah, coffee reigns supreme out here. So
Oh,
yeah.
as I always tell people, and as I tell people in my training classes, as hackers or penetration testers, as we should say, it's very dangerous to let the levels of blood in your caffeine stream get too high. So we need to make sure you are constantly topped up.
That is a great way to put it. So,
Oh yes,
what that video does show, though, is the automated nature of all of this. And it sort of references back that a lot of times the good guys are doing a lot of manual work while the bad guys are doing all sorts of automated work and just sort of, you know what, I'm out having a cup of coffee while I'm trying to
yeah.
crack 15 million passwords.
Yeah, that's right. There are lots of manual elements to it, but you are absolutely right. The information security community, especially from a security researcher's point of view, like myself, someone who's doing this for good rather than for evil.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very good community of kind of open source tooling and things. There's loads of really smart people out there who are writing code to develop tools, freely available tools that a lot of the security community use to help them automate a lot of the manual work that we do when we're assessing our client security. Of course, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and I'm sure there are plenty of threat actors, malicious attackers out there using these tools in amongst other ones that they might be developing themselves. But there is a lot out there we can do to automate things. However, without that tooling, there's still a million and one manual checks and manual tests that would require a human at a mouse and a keyboard to do. And that's really where the penetration testing comes in. Yeah.
And it takes a human to tell another human, hey, dummy, let's do better passwords. How about that? So, so you do mention something that you're a hacker for good, and the media loves these terms, but I want you to help the general audience understand them. What is the difference among black hat, white hat, and gray hat hackers, at least in your definition?
Yeah.
Because I know the media loves to throw them around because they're cool terms, but I don't.
Yeah.
They're not really utilized in the technical parlance. It's almost like a marketing piece.
Yeah, I know what you mean. They're certainly not terms that I really kind of use day to day. But yes, you're kind of textbook definitions of basically is the MO behind it. It's whether you are malicious or not. So a black hat would be someone who is attacking, hacking, compromising systems, gaining unauthorized access to systems for malicious purposes, whether that be for financial gain, political gain, to sell data on, whatever it might be, just for fun, even, because unfortunately there are people who do it out there just for kicks. Yeah. A white hat is someone like myself, someone who has kind of learned the dark arts in many ways, if you want to call it that way, but use it to help organizations secure themselves. And that therein lies pretty much the definition of my day-to-day job, which is the penetration testing. So that allows me to do a lot of the things that the bad guys do, but of course with the permission of a company who are expecting me to test their networks, their websites. And I would simulate an attack. And that's what a penetration test is. It's a simulated cyber attack. And the whole point of it is, if I can help an organization plug the weak holes and make them less vulnerable, hopefully they'll be able to fix those holes before the bad guys get there. And that's what I'm doing. So I'm a white hat. And a gray hat, is kind of that kind of vague middle ground. And a lot of the things you'll see is they're kind of like black hats turned good. So people who might have started off on the wrong side and have since either, started companies or whatever it might be. But yes, you will find slightly different things wherever you look. But like you said, it's certainly by no means kind of day-to-day parlance that we'd use.
and I do have to say, I find the gray hats a little bit more interesting because, to your point, you're hacking with permission. Gray hats are hacking for good, but they don't have permission to do it. So if they compromise somebody's system, typically, if they compromise somebody's system and they sort of point it out, there can be legal blowback because what they've done is technically illegal.
It is. However, I would hope that there wouldn't be too many kind of grey hats doing that. Most, well, I say most, I'm speaking like I have a direct frame of reference. Of course I don't. But many grey hats are actually effectively white hats in that they are doing it for good now, and I would hope and expect them to gain the permission and authorization first. It's just how they came to be a white hat. people like, I hand on heart, I've not been sort of breaking the law and evading the police and been in prison for breaking the Computer Misuse Act for years. And if I had done, and now I'm here where I am today, that would probably make me a grey hat.
Sure.
But yes, you're right. At the end of the day, if someone is gaining in the UK, we have the Computer Misuse Act and other things. But there's of course applicable legislation and law all over the world. But if you are gaining unauthorized access to a system, that in my mind makes you a black hat, shall we say?
Right. Yeah, regardless of your reasoning behind
exactly.
it. Yeah.
Whatever you say to make you to help you sleep easy at night is whatever you say to satisfy your moral compass. But if you're doing things unauthorized, you're breaking the law. Let's be honest.
Yeah. Okay, good. That's a good description of it. But it actually leads to a tangent and the rise of bounties. That companies, and you can explain this to folks, but companies putting out bounties to find bugs and the such.
Yeah.
I mean, that's become an industry in and of itself to a certain extent. So first of all, do you do anything? Does in.security do anything along those lines? And what do you think about that in terms of an incentive to find flaws? Do you think it's a workable paradigm to actually find flaws in software, hardware, and whatnot?
Yeah. So my company doesn't do it as part of a corporate process or policy or things like that. I think in most places, many individuals will have their own kind of bug bounty setups. So I am registered on a very popular bug bounty website, and yes, that is an initiative that many companies and organizations do set up in a very kind of proactive and forthcoming way. And it's been very. There'll always be people who will debate the good and the bad, but generally it's considered to be a very proactive thing and a very mature thing to do, because in the world we live in, a lot of organizations, especially big ones who have something really to protect, they're kind of thinking, it might only be a matter of time, and we'd rather secure ourselves proactively and make sure we're applying good levels of defense and depth, make sure we're doing best practices. And why not, rather than pay for 100 or 1,000 penetration testers, which would cost us loads and loads of money, why not open this up to the community in a very structured, in a very procedural way, and see if we can get help? And of course, that's incentivized to the community. Could be in the form of cash, it could be in swag, it could be whatever the company just kind of decides to do, sending out freebies. But yeah, it's been embraced for a good while now, and you're right, it's an absolute industry in itself. Yeah.
So from your perspective, you think it's a positive thing?
I do think it's a positive thing. Yeah, I absolutely think it's a positive thing when done correctly. And there are good and bad ways to do everything in cybersecurity, but when done correctly, it can really, really help organizations. And many of the organizations who do subscribe and open up bug bounty platforms, just by looking at the numbers on some of these platforms that people can sign up for, the number of bugs that they sort of squash, figuratively speaking, are phenomenal. And it just goes to think, if they hadn't done that, might all those be there? Could they have been exploited? Might they have gone bankrupt from a breach they couldn't recover from in the meantime? So, like I said, there are arguments for both sides, but I do think it's a very positive thing. Yeah.
All right. So we've already gone off some of the questions there, and we'll get back on track because we do have some things to talk about. So when you're coming in, you're doing penetration testing, and penetration testing outside in. So basically, you're trying to get from the outside in. Aside from passwords, what other sort of attack vectors are you thinking about to gain unauthorized access to a network or to systems or to data?
Okay, so that initially depends on the scope of the engagement. When any penetration testing company will, engage with a client, there'll be a very specific scope of work, a proposal that will define explicitly what is in and out of scope. So it might be that a company approaches me and says, hey, we want you to test all of the ways in from this site, our London branch, let's say. Or it might be, we want you to just look at our website, but don't try and attack our networks. It might be that they want phishing in comparison with something else. And that is, of course, a method in its own right. So
which we will get to.
I'm sure we will.
Yeah.
So you typically won't go for everything possible because it might not be in scope. You'll always stick to what you've been given, of course, explicit permission and authorized to do. But with that in mind, some of the attack vectors you would look at would be to identify the client's attack surface first of all. So that would be using automated and manual approaches to identify what said client is exposing publicly to the internet. It could be an email, so it could be Outlook web access, for example, which is a common thing that people use to remotely access their email. It might be a remote administration port, which allows an IT administrator to connect in on a computer terminal that might be exposed. It could be a website, it could be a number of things. And with that in mind, you would then look to formulate the next stage of your penetration test on the attack surface you have. And, you know, as you get more experience doing it, you get to kind of know the things that you might want to look for in these examples. A website, for example, looking at that and assessing the security of a website is very different to assessing the security of a network. Ultimately, you're doing the same thing, trying to find a vulnerability to exploit, a hole to break in with, but the process and method in which you approach those two things is quite different, and the tooling is certainly very different. Another way, as I've sort of touched on it myself now, is phishing, of course. So if that's in scope to do, then yes, absolutely, phishing is becoming a very, very popular way for the bad guys to use, of course, now, because circling back to our cybersecurity being a people problem, you could spend tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars of perimeter security and make your company Fort Knox. But if you don't have the awareness piece and the kind of the education piece down correctly, unfortunately, yeah, it might be someone clicking a link or opening an attachment, and that unfortunately might make the cookie crumble from the inside out.
So I tell a lot of people the two most dangerous tools to your cybersecurity are these.
Oh yes.
Whether you're a lefty or a righty, it's just you just click the mouse or whatever. Maybe on your laptop you're doing this.
Yeah, no, it's very true.
Those are the two most dangerous tools to your cybersecurity. And since you brought up phishing, let's jump into that, because you have a very cool deal for phishing as well.
I do. Let me share my screen again.
I mean, again, the psychology, and we're going to talk about the psychology of it, because as a tester, I want to get your opinion when you're testing about human psychology when it comes to phishing attacks and what have you. But let's first go over this, and then we'll delve into that.
So there is kind of some techie stuff going on here, but I'm going to try to avoid that as much as possible. What this is demonstrating,
you can give people a hint to how smart you are.
Oh, okay.
So go for it.
Oh no, this is. I would love to take full credit of this, but this piece of software on the left is actually one of those many open source tool sets available, which unfortunately makes it all the more scary. But yeah, in this particular case, this is actually a video that we use on our cyber awareness and management training, and it doesn't just necessarily show the phish, because phishing is the kind of scenario that this video is based on. But what this specific video does is actually shows how two-factor authentication is not the be-all end-all, because this attack will bypass two-factor authentication, which again is a big talking point in its own right. Of course, by saying that bypassing two-factor authentication is possible is not to say that it's a waste of time. You should absolutely 110% of the time always use two-factor authentication when you have it available to you, and it will mitigate kind of 99% of those low-hanging fruit attacks that someone will try. And if someone was in possession of your email address or username and your clear text password, and they see that code, they see the pop-up, please enter your 6-digit code, whatever it is, 99.9% of people will just get bored and move on, because they won't have that code. So you should absolutely always use it.
And I just want to point out, there is a difference between two-factor and multi-factor. Multi-factor to me is 3 or more steps, not just 2 steps.
Yeah, that would be correct. So in terms of like the sort of the terminology that was used when two-factor came out, two-factor authentication is something you know and something you have. So you know your password and you have a 6-digit code. Let's say you have a mobile phone. The third factor, the most easily kind of approachable way to look at this is things like biometrics. So for example, a thumbprint on your phone, or Windows Hello that scans your face, or whatever it might be, Face ID and things like this. So these factors, I mean, some of these devices we use these factors in isolation. So for example, to unlock an iPhone, you don't have to put in a passcode and then get a 6-digit code and then show your face to the screen. But of course, security can be built in layers for other devices and applications. What I do sometimes hear though is, and I have really heard this, I'm not just making it up for the sake of this discussion. Yeah, we use two-factor authentication. The user has to put in a password, then they get prompted for a second password. That's not two-factor authentication. That's the same factor twice. That's something you know and something you know.
Hey, you just made my week, because now I have another example that I can use.
There
That's
you go.
Fantastic.
What can I say? You're welcome. This is the beauty of this discussion.
Yeah.
But if I stop ranting for a second and jump into this, on the left here we have our attacking machine, which is me sitting at the computer, and on the right here I have a web browser playing the victim. Now, we've set up here, this is a domain called outlookinsecurityawareness.com. This is our domain, nothing suspicious about this, but you'll notice there's a specific string at the end here, this path, which if we manage to get a user to click on, and this is where the fish comes in, if we can deliver that link somehow in a fish, this is how it would all start. And what we're going to do is we're going to take that link and I'm going to just copy it into a browser. Now, this is a browser on my desktop. And on the left, this is actually a system in the cloud. This is not on my local system. This is a public system that Insecurity own. And we're going to log in. And this is Microsoft. And I want to point out now that this is not a cloned site. This is legitimate Microsoft we're logging into here. Okay. Right. I'm not hacking Microsoft. I'm not doing anything here. All this program is going to do, as we will see, is play man in the middle, which is a commonly used phrase. It's going to take the requests from this browser, it's going to intercept them, do what it needs to do, and then pass that information to Microsoft, who, as far as they're concerned, is just going to see legitimate login. Right. Now, when we put in the username there and we type in the password, on the left, it'll come up quite small, but you'll see in green, it's recorded the clear text password and the username, because the user, to start off with, navigated to that very specific link that we had. Yep. Now you'll see we're being prompted for a code, and this is me typing in the two-factor authentication code. And then when that user logs in, on the left, again, you won't be able to see it, but it says all authorization tokens intercepted. Here is the user, the victim user now, logging into their inbox, completely unawares this is happening. And of course, yeah, I'm telling them to go and get some security awareness training there and linking them to my site. You can see on the left here, it says we've got a captured token. And I'm just going to pause it here for a second, because this huge big blob of white text there looks like complete jargon, but it is in fact very, very important. That sort of section of text there is everything the attacker needs to hijack this user session. This is something called a cookie, or specifically a session cookie. And what this allows the attacker to do is, if they can capture this, they can inject that into their own browser and become the target user. And that's exactly what I'm going to do here. So
but let me stop you there real quick, because
sure.
The key word there is the session. They're not hacking the account. They're hacking this particular session, correct?
Correct. So when this victim user logged onto Microsoft, Microsoft will have told their browser lots and lots of technical information, and it will have set something called a cookie, or a session cookie, in their browser. And that will uniquely identify that user in their current browser session. That cookie gets sent with every request to Microsoft, to Outlook.com, so that Outlook.com continually knows that this user is who they say they are and they have the correct authorization material, which is this cookie. So if anyone can present this cookie while it's valid, whilst that session is active, they can effectively become that user, and that's what we're going to see here. So I'm going to minimize that, and that happened very quickly there. In fact, I'm not even sure if you can see my mouse doing it, but I'm going to minimize the browser. I do click it in the top right there, and this is now a completely separate browser, and I'm going to refresh the browser just to show I'm not logged in, as you can see there. So this is now this is now the browser on my machine again, but we're now emulating what the attacker's going to do once they've captured this secret material from the victim session. And all I'm going to do is copy that, good old Control-C on my keyboard, and using a browser extension, I'm going to effectively paste that cookie into my browser. And then once I've done that, all I need to do is navigate to, in this case, live.com, because that's the name of the domain we've got here. And then without knowing any username or password, I've now logged in as that user, and you can see their inbox. I don't know. I mean, I do know their password because it was shown on the attacker screen, but from an attacker's perspective, they've bypassed two-factor authentication. They didn't know. They haven't seen that. They haven't seen that code. Now, the code itself is probably stored on that attacker system somewhere, but it's not presented to the user. It's not presented to the attacker. And if we move the browser side by side, you can see the victim is still in their session, completely unaware, while the attacker can start doing what they want now. They could look to send emails as that user. They could, of course, go trawling through the inbox and looking for things. So again, circling back, because I don't want anyone to misconstrue here, I'm not for a second saying that you should not use two-factor authentication.
Right.
Absolutely, always use it.
Just don't click the link.
Just don't click the damn link. Exactly.
Right.
No, good two-factor authentication, like really, really long secure passwords, are what's called defense in depth. Yep. It's not about becoming immune and impenetrable, because no one is immune. Security is only secure until it's broken. It's about putting enough layers in so that the attackers get bored and move on, because they realize, you know what, oh my God, it's layer one and there's still another security control I have to get through. Then they get through that, oh my God, there's another security control I'm still not in yet. They're going to get bored generally and move on. Unless you're guarding state secrets. I'm a relatively uninteresting person, like the next person says. I'm not interesting enough for someone. I hope I'm not interesting enough for someone to be so determined as to try and compromise me. But of course, a lot of organizations, large organizations, are very targeted for what they do. Yep. So yeah, absolutely. Defense in depth is absolutely key and paramount here.
Well, I mean, look, you have a job because hackers, that's their job. Yeah. And they're going to figure out a way to do it. And it may take time, but that's all they have. That they have to be right once.
Precisely.
And you have to be right all the time.
And that's exactly what a penetration test looks to address. Because penetration tests are very small time periods where you might only have a week or a couple of weeks to try and look at an entire company and say, right, what's wrong? Find as many vulnerabilities as you can. Try to exploit them, see what the potential impact of exploiting those vulnerabilities is, and then report that back along with remedial action to help that company secure them. An attacker has got all the time in the world. I might only have 2 weeks to do something, but someone targeted might have months. They might have years. You just don't know. So, it's a really, really valuable part of the cybersecurity process. And it's certainly one that will help protect companies moving forwards and allow them to have some reassurance and peace of mind that they're doing their best and they're not going to be that low-hanging fruit.
So a lot of what we've talked about here obviously focuses on the technical side. And when I was in IT, that was my goal. My goal was always to make it as secure as possible, to hire, because we never did penetration testing on any networks or systems we built. Because that's just, that's just the wrong way to do it.
Can't mark your own homework, Sean.
No,
come on,
exactly. That's just not ethical in so many ways. But so we would hire penetration testers, and we would hope you would find something, because we knew there's just no way to be 100% secure. But when I left IT, one of the reasons why I left IT is because what I realized, to your point earlier, is that security is not a technical problem, it's a human problem. But it's a business problem, not an IT problem. And too many people kept pointing at the IT department saying, well, it's their headache. And I kept saying, yes, but when things go wrong, it becomes your headache.
Absolutely.
And you have to know how to respond to it. So in all the work that you do, are you all focused on the IT side of the house, or are you working on the business side of the house as well, saying, okay, this is what we found, and then if an attacker got in, this is how you, Mr. Business Side or Ms. Business Side of the house, would have to react?
Yeah. Okay, so that's a great question. Penetration tests will predominantly look at the technical aspects and report on them. However, the findings that you can get from a penetration test, it might be that you identify a whole host of vulnerabilities that at their core aren't technical problems. So as a result of a penetration test, yes, you can actually passively address business risk and address procedural factors and address human factors and effectively address non-technical factors. Not all vulnerabilities that are reported on from a pen test are at their core technical in nature. Yes, there will always be some things that might be you need to check a box somewhere in the configuration or something. You might need to disable something to make something a bit more secure, and that's all great. And those are, of course, are very, very important. But the breadth of vulnerabilities that exist, and you're actually quite rightly so, that are not always completely technical at their core, are the really interesting ones, because like when we say when I'm doing cyber awareness training and things, the awareness and the education piece is kind of one thing that is very, very hard for an IT budget to address. It's the human factor, and it's everyone's onus of responsibility, not IT's, as you touched on before.
Yep.
It's you, the employee. It's your responsibility to make sure you are doing everything you can to protect the company. Because, you know, if you get into good habits doing that and the education piece is there, you will do this outside of work just as much as you will in, and it will become second nature. So getting into good habits and breeding that culture from the ground up is a really, really good and positive step moving forward. And it's still something that unfortunately a lot of companies still do lack. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, tremendously.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you said it, because again, I sound
Yeah.
like a broken record to everybody. And
Well,
with your accent, they might actually listen to you. So,
well, IT are still often, unfortunately, seen as a hindrance when they're trying to make things more
yes,
secure. Everyone points the finger. Why are you making me do 3 or 4 things to get to the
right.
data I need? You know, you're making
And
my life miserable. And when
that's the
people can take,
key.
yeah, yeah. When people can take shortcuts, they will. It's
Yes.
human nature. You know, IT, they have a hard time, bless them, but they're doing their best. But yeah, they unfortunately are in many times like the natural enemy, and it's not really right. Yeah.
I mean, I've said this for 20 plus years. I said the more convenient it is for you to use, the easier it is for somebody to get into it.
Absolutely.
So if I
And
make it a little bit harder for you, I'm making it harder for somebody else to get in.
absolutely.
Uh,
And you
and
touched on a very important point there with convenience and usability. And this actually touches on passwords that we were talking about earlier. So one of the best things you can do is use a password manager if you
I
don't
was
use it
just about,
already.
you were reading my
Well,
mind. I was
there
just
you
about to
go.
ask you, use it as
And
a
it
segue, but go
and
for
it's
it.
only great minds think alike, Sean.
Yeah.
But no, it's good because it brings up the very, very important topic of, for a long time, and we're talking years ago now, but for a long time, people wanted security and usability in a single succinct package when it came to passwords, and it
Yep.
didn't exist for a long time. But nowadays, it really does. You can get very, very easy to use password managers that have a very kind of minimal path of resistance that do fantastic things to protect your keys to the kingdom. And we're
Right.
now at a place where you really can, you know, people who are non-technical or people who are kind of fearful of our IT maybe can really kind of embrace this, given the right kind of introduction to it. And it's become very, very, it's become great and it's fantastic. And security and usability really is together in one package now. So yeah.
Yeah. And I would highly suggest people who don't understand what they are, find people who do know and talk to them about it. Or just try it out. Try it out
Yeah.
on a couple of websites. It doesn't impact anything. And really, it does. You only have to remember one password then. You
I'm
just have
going
to
to,
remember the password to your password manager, and then you're
th-
golden.
there
Really,
you go. I'm going to shamelessly just steal this screen yet again.
go for it.
And I am going to quickly drag back on the last section of my. Oh, yeah, look, don't reuse passwords.
Yeah,
Don't
there you
reuse
go.
passwords.
We're re-emphasizing now.
Yeah, exactly. If I wasn't shouting that enough, just to show visually what an example of a password manager might look like. So on the right here, this is the branding for one password. That's for number one with password. On the left here, we have one called LastPass, and this is just for somebody who might try to visualize what this does. So this is one in the browser, but they have mobile apps and other things as well. And like you quite rightly said, if you create one really ridiculously secure what's called master password, that unlocks your manager, and then your password manager generates the rest of your passwords for you. So I don't know any of my passwords, and it's a scary thing to say. Everything from my email to my banking to my kids' banks and things like that, it's all locked away in a password vault. It's a bit scary when you think about that. But I also know that all of my passwords look like this. Of course, not this exact one on the screen.
Sure.
For anyone who thinks they can hack me that way.
Don't think you can copy and paste it. Sorry.
Yeah. Everyone taking a quick screenshot. But no, I always start at 99 characters. I only ever reduce that, unfortunately, when I come across applications that really infuriate me by telling me I can't use more than 30 characters. And that's often down to, unfortunate, just sort of insecure design and things. But yeah. All of my password look like complete gobbledygook. Sometimes I go ahead and put spaces in that as well, just because why not? And then
they're the best. I mean,
Exactly.
all websites should accept spaces, but I mean, a
Absolutely.
small minority
Well, look,
do.
it's funny you say that. That's a couple of slides on. Use spaces.
Yeah,
The most common place most people use passwords day in day out. They're Windows laptops. Windows supports spaces. There is okay. Looking right at the camera, there is no reason not to use spaces in Windows. There we go. Okay, promote passphrases over passwords.
right,
If you're not quite at the password manager's place yet, that's fine. But even that is going to be much better than the word secure, where you've substituted an E for a three, and then
right.
you've put 1, 2, 3 exclamation mark at the end. So yeah, there's lots we can do to make ourselves more secure.
So I want to be cognizant of your time because you are a busy gentleman with kids, family, business, and it is the afternoon where you are. So
It is the afternoon, yeah.
uh, so let's talk real quick. Phishing. When you're doing the phishing, and I know you're not a psychologist, but have you found a common trait in the people who fall for the phishing attacks? Because that has been one of the things that has bedeviled me for years as to who falls not for the really good ones and not for business email compromise where an actual real email address was compromised and you get an email
Yeah, yeah.
to transfer funds. I mean, I get that. I can accept that you don't call to confirm and what have you. But the real simple phishing attacks, especially when it happens to individuals at home, is there a reason people fall for those that you have
Like
found
yeah,
in
like you
your
said. So
dealings?
I've never kind of looked into it from that from that angle. So in terms of like the consumer, generally people will have experienced, junk email, spam email at some point in their life. Sometimes there's kind of waves of it when there's, campaigns going around.
Sure.
Sometimes there's not a lot of it. Most, and I'm only speaking from personal experience here. Most of the junk email and phishing stuff that I get to my personal email addresses is so ridiculously fake
Yeah.
that I'm not going to say you'd have to be stupid to click on it because that's unfair to people who actually might fall victim. But the context, the scenario, whether it's a sense of urgency, whether I've won something, whether the U.S.
Right.
Treasury is holding 6 million waiting for me and I have to send just a few Bitcoin to confirm my identity
Yep.
first, or whatever ridiculous scheme it might be. I would find it very hard to believe that I would click on a link that way. And I hope that doesn't come across as arrogant, but if people have seen
No, I mean,
anyone who's seen the really, really, really dodgy
bad
stuff,
ones. Yeah.
they won't click on it. They wouldn't click on
Yeah.
it in a million years. Yeah, the interesting part comes in when there's been a bit of careful thought around it. And I have had some personal email with very careful thought around it, but it's not usually tailored to me. It's usually so. For example, I had one just last week from Royal Mail, from UK Royal Mail. Saying that I was supposed to have a parcel delivered, but I was due to pay. I think it was a £2.99 customs charge because it had come from overseas. Now I knew I hadn't ordered anything. I have paid customs charges and things in the past, so that process isn't unfamiliar with me. And when it's happened legitimately in the past, I have received email from Royal Mail at the point where I've not or I've been out or a package has been refused, for example. Now, of course, I didn't click that, but when inspecting the email, it was very cleverly done. They'd gone and taken the correct branding,
Yeah.
the greeting, the sign off, the salutation was all very, very good. And those types of emails, I could easily see people clicking on.
Yeah.
And if you'll excuse the pun, if you cast your net over a large enough area, you're bound to catch some fish,
Oh yeah.
as we always
Yeah.
say. And with some of these email campaigns that consumers get, it really is a case of that, because some of them are huge and they will, spam these to millions and millions of random email addresses. On balance of, laws of probability will say you're going to get people clicking something
Yep.
somewhere. You absolutely will. It'll just happen. I'm not going to say it's a certainty, but it almost pretty much is.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's as close to a certainty as you can get.
Exactly. I mean, if someone was personally targeting me, I would be. If someone was personally targeting me, who knows? I might click on something, but
Yep.
I would certainly be a lot more curious. And me being me in the industry I'm in, I would actually look to potentially interact with that email, but in a very safe environment that's not connected to the internet and not on my personal workstation. Just because that's an itch I have to scratch, I'd be quite curious about it.
Mhm.
Not from quite I'm going to get revenge way, but just because it's interesting to me and
Sure. Research.
exactly.
Yeah.
But again, now if we move to a corporate environment and knowing the way when in.security conduct their phishing assessments, you've then got quite a lot of freedom to move around depending on how much reconnaissance you've done, or the level of the profile you've built up against your target, whether that be a company-wide kind of to all staff, or whether it's a more targeted phish or a spear phish if you're looking for maybe an executive member. And then you can start to get a bit more creative and build up a really good profile or persona. I mean, a common one that a lot of companies use is Outlook Web Access. Many organizations enable that quite legitimately, so people can check their email from home. I mean, yes, a lot of us will have Outlook installed or email clients installed on a laptop, but that, of course, webmail is still a thing. Of course it is.
Or on vacation. That at the business office on vacation, they just have to check email real quick.
Absolutely. And of course, I'm not going to give away too many company secrets, but I'm sure many other pen testing companies do it as well. Looking to emulate or even clone a company's Outlook Web Access or their remote email portal, and then use that as a phish. You've immediately, bypassed a number of things that would immediately draw suspicion. For example, we're not telling them they've won the lottery. We're not telling them they've won a prize. They're not owed any money. All this kind of stuff that I would expect many people to. It's to do with their email, and it's their work email. And if you build that up, and try and look as if it may be coming from your company's IT department. Even better if that company uses outsourced IT.
Yeah.
So there might not be as a direct relationship between the target individuals. I've personally had very, very good success in the past doing that kind of attack and things. But yeah, there's lots of kind of human factors you can put the touches on to make emails very believable. And that's even before you start adding in things like phishing, where you can take phone calls in and kind of build up that level of credence and sort of really help provide that full sense of security.
So I still use this video from Cisco, and it's probably at this point almost 6 years old, I would think, maybe 5. But to your point about phishing, how they use the psychology of the recipient against them. And she references sales because they're always eager to help and make a sale. And it's really well done. So I still use it in a lot of my presentations to give people an idea of how this works and why you have to train your employees. You're not being rude if you don't answer, or if you delete it, or you're not being an annoyance if you ask IT, hey, is this legitimate? In fact, you're being spot on. If you are unsure, even by a microcosm, call your IT folks, outsourced or insourced, call your IT folks, say, hey, is this legitimate?
You don't click anything. I mean, that's a one-way ticket to, potential employee of the month status there, right there. Don't be afraid. Don't see IT as the enemy. Don't take a risk. You're not annoying anyone. Anyone in IT would rather find it be a false alarm than for you to have clicked it because you didn't think otherwise. And then who knows what could happen.
Right, because chaos will reign.
Absolutely.
Real quick, because we're talking nanoseconds and then it's all over. In fact, you were referencing something. I wanted to tell this story because you'll find it great. I have a client. I won't say who it is or what industry in, but they have outsourced IT. And when the pandemic hit, the sales folks for my client obviously went remote. Well, they needed access to, they keep all their information in the central server. The external IT team gave them remote desktop access.
Right.
And just turned it on. Didn't do anything, didn't really fully secure it. Somebody finally found out, because it's not hard to find that remote desktop is open. Somebody just found it. And basically the door was open. They launched a ransomware attack from the in-house server. There was no phishing. Nobody clicked on anything. They were already inside. They just launched the attack from the inside.
It's very, very unfortunate. That's what that is.
But the reason why they did it is because the salespeople complained, no, it's too hard. VPN's too hard, or it's unstable, or I don't have a good enough connection for it. So give me something easier. I just want it to work. That was the refrain that really started to come up that drove me out of IT, really. I just want it to work. No, you don't. You want to work for it, so other people have to work for it.
Yeah, that's a shame. And like you said, if ransomware got in there, then all bets are off. And just while we're on the topic of ransomware, because I often get asked this, the kind of only the only protection is the wrong word, because unfortunately you can't necessarily stop something if it looks like it's happening. But if you do unfortunately fall victim to ransomware, backups. Make sure you take regular backups.
Well, my thing is, I tell all my clients in any presentation I give, you ask your IT team how long to recover from a ransomware attack.
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
we don't have to pay the ransom.
So exactly. So the advice always is don't pay. I'm not gonna tarnish anyone who's paid.
Nope.
I'm very fortunate and blessed enough not to have been put in that position. But the advice is always never to pay. You're encouraging activity. You're more likely to get targeted again. There's no guarantee you'll get the key. There's no guarantee you'll get your data back.
Or even it'll work well enough.
Or even it'll work. You'll still be. So you should just consider infrastructure that, in my opinion, assuming you've got a robust backup policy and cycle in place, consider that burned. Just get rid of it, build from scratch. I mean, take the recent Colonial, the pipeline hack, where the ransom was paid, and the key it took so long to decrypt. It was effectively useless anyway. It took so long to do. Just the advice is not to pay wherever possible, and make sure you've got backups.
And that's
accept it and make sure you've got backups.
That's why my mantra is I prepare companies to be hacked, because I'm not dealing with the IT anymore. I'm trying to educate the business side to say, look, absolutely, you're the ones who are going to have to pay for this. So
absolutely, how
about working with your IT team to make sure that you don't, or you minimize how painful it's really going to be?
Exactly. It's really, really good, and you should keep doing that. It's certainly something that we in security try to do all the time, is making sure that we can really translate that technical impact all the way up to business risk. Because at the end of the day, when you've got executives looking at maybe the outcome of a pen test report, they don't care what technical vulnerability is going on. They want to know what it's going to mean to them if their site's taken offline, if they're whatever it happens to be. So really making sure that you can address and translate that risk effectively, so that the impact is potentially realized rather than just hypothesized, is a really, really important part. So yeah, absolutely do that. We always make sure we do that, and it'll certainly help everyone really allocate budget, spend resources, and pay to protect what you've got. Because unfortunately, that's now the world we're living in.
Well, Will, again, I'm going to be cognizant of your time here, but I can just give you an advance heads up. This is just part one, because I'm going to bring you back. This was a lot of fun, and there's so many other avenues to go down. I mean, we just scratched phishing and passwords. There's so many different avenues that we can go down that I think viewers, lifting the blinders and educating people of how it works on the other side of the equation, I think we'll put some context around, okay, well, this is why I need to protect and use different passwords. This is why I don't click on links in email, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. As long as the focus is proactive and positive in terms of its education, rather than just fear, uncertainty, and doubt. No. Because I don't want to sit up here and talk to you saying the sky is falling, we're all doomed. Because it's not about that. It's not about that.
There's got to be solutions. There are solutions.
Absolutely.
And there are things that you can do as a human being that says, okay, take a deep breath before you click the mouse, or take your hand off the mouse altogether while you're reading an email. And then you won't immediately go for it. But hey, this was fantastic. I actually think we stayed within the parameters way better than I thought we would.
I'm impressed. I thought we loosely did as well. I don't know. I thought when we started talking about VPNs, that could have led into all manner of things. It was good, and then I started going off on airports and Starbucks, and God, it could have gone all over the place.
Part two, we're going to do that, because that is one area that I think people are really lax about, and what have you. So I do promise all viewers, and I'm promising Will now, that I will call on you again.
I'm being promised.
Yes, you're being promised.
There we go.
Well, hey, this was fantastic. I want to thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy day. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate everybody tuning in. I hope you did take notes on this one. If not, go back and watch. Will's really good at this. Check out in.security. It's not insecurity.com. It's in.security is his website. Check them out. Check out what they do. You're going to be a black hat virtually, right? And
Yeah, well remembered as well. So yeah,
yeah,
in security, colleagues and things have been very lucky enough to have trained at Black Hat for several years, both in security and former companies. And you're right, in less than 2 weeks now, time's creeping up on us. We're delivering virtual training, both our hacking enterprises training for aspiring pen testers and our defending enterprises training for the SOC side, the threat hunters, to try and catch what I'm doing as a tester. So we've got both sides of the coin there, and it'll be running in a couple of weeks. And there's still time to sign up for anyone who's interested.
Yeah, and I'll put links. Actually, I'll put some links because you sent me some links, but if you got some other ones, send them to me and I'll make sure that they're in the video notes.
Will do. Thank you very much. Yeah.
But everybody check them out. If you're not sure what Black Hat is, go check it out as well. It's cool. That and DEF CON are really cool. Just don't have your Wi-Fi or your Bluetooth.
Oh, no. No. Leave your phones in the hotel room. Absolutely.
And you put them in stuff that are protected and whatnot. You bring nothing with you.
Well, who knows, Sean? Maybe after all these restrictions are lifted, if we might even cross paths at Black Hat in the future. Who knows?
You know what? If you're going to go physically, I've never been, so I will make the special trip, and maybe we'll do an in-person show.
There you go. Your first beer's on me. There we are.
Okay, fantastic. Hey, well, this was great. You did good, so I appreciate it. Everybody who's tuned in, thanks very much. This is Did You Know That? ? Be sure, like I said, subscribe below. I never know which side the button's on and what have you. Hit the bell because then you'll get notified when new content is available, which we try to do at least every other week. And for Will Hunt, my name is Sean O'Rourke. Everybody out there in the ether, you take care and be well. And Will, until next time, you take care as well.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me, Sean, today. It's been absolutely fantastic. Looking forward to the next part.
Excellent. See ya.
Take care.